Welcome to the ORICoop series, discussing this concept of how to make an organic farming movement from scratch. We are the Organic and Regenerative Investment Cooperative, and I am speaking with Rohan Clarke, who is founder of Get Up, that's with 2 Ds, not 2 Ts, which is a cool community organising platform. Rohan's also part of the Incubator Co-op, and he's also a consultant that provides services to cooperatives, so around governance, engagement and funding, which is why he's helped out with ORICoop and he's been part of our journey for the last number of months, and it's amazing to have Rohan here for our interview series. Rohan, thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, Sam. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure, mate. I'm really looking forward to this, and you've been stuck into the nitty-gritty of the investment side of things with ORICoop. So we're going to talk specifically about some of those conversations you've had with institutional investors as one of those examples, but also I'd like to just discuss more broadly about investment and investment into organic farming. Our topic for this discussion is titled around investment, collaborative structures and learnings from ORICoop. So let's get into it. Let's find a bit more about you. Tell us where you were born. No, don't go that far. Let's just give us unpack it. Your passion. What gets you up in the morning?
I've got 2 kids and a dog. Dragged out every morning by them. No, the prime motivator I have is to help leaders build communities, and so that's effectively across all the things I'm doing. That's what we're trying to do. So ORICoop was a great opportunity to work with Carolyn Suggett. Was the starting point. That was how I got involved, and then to work with a board that's motivated and has values very much aligned to my own.
So it seems like tech and cooperatives are sort of the 2 areas that you want to bring together around that idea of making community.
Absolutely. Tech and co-op and trying to understand how co-ops are evolving, because they're kind of re-emerging, if you like, from a hiatus. When I was kind of starting out, co-ops have very much been, there's very much a demutualisation trend. As all credit unions and building societies were being demutualised, and they were kind of considered old world and past their time. And I think there's this kind of re-emergence, partly as a reaction to, the conspicuous consumption of earlier decades, basically. So yes, very much interested in where tech and co-ops come together. And
what about organic farming, Rohan? Did you grow up on a farm? You got a passion for organic farming, or just like the idea of it?
I like the idea that so I have my experience, in the farming sector is relatively limited. Although I have seen the damage that corporatised farms, farms that are driven by very, very much the profit motive, can do in formal life, as assisting with fund management and fundraising for various ventures around almonds and trees and. The thing that I like about the organic farming sector is, apart from the communities, it effectively brings a different filter to the farming process. So it brings more to it than the profit motive. So that's kind of very broadly everything from community to all farming practices.
Yeah, that's great. Now, a bit more of a high-level question. This topic is around how we create a bit of a social movement around organic farming. What's your insights, maybe from an investment point of view? How do we really garner the community support behind organic farming and specifically around what ORICoop's doing?
Yeah, good question. I guess one of the key lessons we've had is very much that we're on a journey. So there's a conversation that Carolyn and I have been having at various occasions about, well, what exactly is that clear and common purpose? We understand there's shared values amongst the people involved in ORICoop, and clearly what we're seeing is there's that resonates with people, a wider community. But trying to really zero in on that clear and common purpose that provides the glue, if you like, for a movement is one of the first things that I think ORICoop's getting there, and there's still finding its way to that absolute crystal clear. And then the next step in terms of creating a movement around it is an executable plan. So like starting small and kind of celebrating your achievements along the way. there's probably not too much more to it than that.
It's quite straightforward, Rohan, isn't it? And that's it. I think we need to keep getting those runs on the boards with ORICoop, because you're right. I think we've got the values, and people love it, and as soon as you talk about it, people get it. Now it's let's prove it. Let's get those farms under our belt and keep supporting those organic farmers across the country. You're right. It's going to happen.
It's the hardest bit seems to be to work out. Well, what is the catalyst? What's the focal point? In order to bring it together to a head, and that's that common purpose. It's like, well, what is the value proposition that, for example, ORICoop brings that provides the cohesion for these quite a disparate group of people that have aligned values, basically.
Mm. Well, I could answer that one, but we'll keep going. We could unpack that we'll leave that for Carolyn to unpack a bit more. Yep. Now, I want to get into some investment questions for you, Rohan. Who wants to invest in organic farms and organics in general? Who are they? Where are they?
Who are they? The interesting question. Also, who are they? The journey that ORICoop's been on has been kind of informative in the sense of we've met investors large and small, institutional, retail, and just as a general comment, there's widespread demand for organic farming, both from to invest in a real asset. The idea that the world's awash with overpriced financial assets, to own a real asset's a good thing, a hedge against inflation, a hedge against. So there's general demand for farming assets, for real assets, and then the organic assets. In particular, people can see that that's a trend that, from an investment standpoint, resonates. Who wants to invest? Basically, the world wants to invest. The challenge really is that, from an institutional perspective, particularly in Australia, where we have, Paul Keating did this great thing of, creating our superannuation guarantee kind of concept that has enabled us to have, one of the largest superannuation funds and systems in the world. They have difficulty in dealing with small numbers, and currently the organic farming sector is a small number for the superannuation sector. So that is part of the challenge at the moment, is how you kind of access the institutional sector from at the larger end of town. That doesn't mean to say there isn't demand from smaller kind of institutional investors. Second thing is there is a bit of an education process that needs to happen, that farming has had. In some ways, in some contexts, a checkered history, both in the good and bad. That people have been experienced great returns based on land valuations, skyrocketing, and so therefore are not driven by the farming so much. They're driven by the land, selling the land themselves. The flip side is there's plenty of stories of farming. Investments that haven't gone so well for one reason or another, and so there's kind of an education element to bring some of that small institutional market along, regardless.
Mm-hmm. An observation I've had over the last few years is that I think there must be a lot of money out there that wants to invest. It's just the opportunities aren't there. Is there some truth to that, Ron? And is that sort of where ORICoop can create a bit of a niche for itself? It's about finding these great opportunities. Its values are all there front and centre, and so if we can start presenting these opportunities, there will be that investment available. Yeah.
Well, what we've kind of discovered is that because there's different levels of demand and there's different sizes of farm, if you like, there's different types of farms, that it's having the right structure for the right investor, and you're right, having access to the opportunities. So the ability to aggregate, if you like, or bring together a number of farms so that large investors can have a pool to invest in is possibly a good thing. Mm. On the other hand, enabling the investment in smaller farms by that generational change from one farmer to another is another way that ORICoop could help. So those type of opportunities, absolutely.
I think that's I'm really excited. Anyway, that's why I'm part of ORICoop. But
yep.
So investors then, what are the vehicles they normally invest through? So are cooperatives part of that list of preferred vehicles that they invest through? Are there things that they might be nervous about? I mean, with your discussions out on the road with ORICoop, are there some what exciting things that come up through cooperatives, or they get nervous about? Can you give a bit of a summary of investors and how they go about investing?
The experience of cooperatives are not your typically cooperatives. The investment in cooperatives is done by members.
Yep.
Okay, and so one of the issues with the cooperative traditionally has been its capital. They're capital constrained because they only look to their members for funds, and the reason for that is external investors will be looking for a return on capital. They mightn't necessarily be looking for the additional benefits the cooperative can bring its members. Members, on the other hand, aren't necessarily looking for a return on capital. In fact, typically they look for other returns for being a member, so that they receive services.
Employment,
and those, yep. And so because there isn't that focus on the profit motive, you immediately have a situation where there's a kind of a non-alignment or misalignment between the members of a cooperative and external investors. And so where you've had historically external investors come into a cooperative, so it's traditionally caused problems. So Murray Goldman's a classic of current times. Namoi Cotton recently is just currently going through a demutualisation. Exactly 10 years ago introduced external capital. What we tried to do in the ORICoop situation was to actually bring the investors in as members, as aligned parties. And what we're trying to do was to use to create a structure which enabled ORICoop to have permanent capital.
Yep.
But where that permanent capital was provided in a way where investors were getting more than simply their return on capital. They were actually wanting to be part of something which had aligned interests. And so whether it's organic farming practices, whether it was the community aspects, the social capital that can be generated for communities who participate. So, in short, the experience we had was that the institutional market found that a difficult concept, and not surprisingly, in other walks of life, I've had the experience where you present a new transaction or a new structure, and the immediate feedback from investors is, "Oh no, give me something I'm used to." And so on. So traditionally, investors wanted, that's right. So investors wanted something that they're used to, and so what we experienced in the past is people go, "No, well, that doesn't work because I'm not interested," and then you come back 3 months later and they go, "Oh yeah, sure, show us that." And so I think someone once said that give me enough time, you can sell anything to anyone. And what we found was, given the amount of time we had, that we weren't going to get there. Interestingly, the structure that we actually proposed is very similar to the actual Tier 1 capital structure that's been kind of announced by Scott Morrison under the federal, that's enabling the idea is to enable larger credit unions and building society and mutuals to access permanent capital, Tier 1 capital. And it's very similar to the structure that we were proposing for ORICoop. Now, that doesn't mean to say ORICoop would have necessarily got it up, because you can see in those larger organisations they have a different risk profile, whereas ORICoop is a start-up. Having said that, investing in farms which are low risk. So that was our experience, I guess, that the institutional market wasn't really ready. The retail market, on the other hand, the feedback we got from people was very much that this was something that they wanted to support, and so that there was demand from mum and dad investors or from people who are that wanted to become members of ORICoop, really believed in this mission, and were saying, "Look, yep, we want to support that its objectives."
That's great. So it feels like we're still in this exploratory phase. And especially with institutional investors, that you go talk to them and they say, "No, I'm used to this sort of structure. Can you set that up?" So it's not that the conversation has stopped or the flow won't potentially be there. It's just being creative in how we could set up other structures around the ORICoop values and cooperative that still allow us the same outcome of long-term preservation of organic farmland. We've just got to think about that for a bit longer. Is that sort of the summary, Rohan?
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think where we got to was that if we simplify it right down, there's effectively three types of farms that have analogously three types of investors that look to invest in them. So at the corporate end of town, the large institutional investor is really looking for a risk-reward profile that's defined by a larger farm that has larger capital requirements, but also has more stable kind of product, if you like, or output that can therefore have stable relationships with major consumers. And so you can see that kind of risk profile and amount, the amount of to be invested really suits a larger institutional market. And we did test the concept very briefly of a property trust that would enable that ORICoop could manage or provide services to, and there was resounding demand for that from the institutional market. So that tier 1 or tier 3, whichever way you want to look at it, that tier of farm could be met by that type of structure and that type of investor. There's kind of a mid-tier where it's smaller farms where there's potentially either generational change or there's a need for whatever reason that a farmer's looking to sell a land, a block of land, a farm that's $2 to $5 million kind of amount, and those properties aren't necessarily going to fit in that corporate kind of area, and so under that we're looking at ways that we can provide funding structures for that, and that may be more through enabling one-off transactions. So the stuff that you're looking at, Sam, through Cultivate Farms and looking at generational change, how do we enable younger farmers to come in and to provide the funding for that to happen? So there's that tier, and then there's another tier which is like, in a sense, non-commercial farms. They're farms that are driven by other more social kind of aspects. So they're farms that often operate around the major city kind of fringes or within cities. And so the value of the land is such that you could never actually operate really a commercial operation on it. And so, but there's a real social benefit into having those farms in existence, and there's been some great work done around the changing nature of the Melbourne food bowl. You would have seen, have you seen that? The risk is it's kind of going to disappear as we build houses all over our farms and on the outer rim. And so the idea is that there are structures that we could possibly put in place that enable philanthropic money to come in to effectively provide a way to finance those farms, so that there's this kind of non-cash returning element to the investment of the farms that enables the farm to be acquired.
It's brilliant, isn't it? I just think there's so much potential here. And again, it comes back to that point we were talking about earlier. I think this is about finding and bringing opportunities. That's what this is about. There's people out there who probably want to invest and get no return. Happy for it just to see it plodding along. And of course, all the way up to the people who are going to get a big return. But I guess, and this is what we think about with Cultivate Farms, we don't have to double guess what investors want. We can just put opportunities out there and see what happens. And I love that way you've categorised those three areas. That's the stuff we get stuck into at ORICoop. So very exciting, Rohan. Now, How much money is available for organic farming right now? Have you got a dollar amount?
No. Interesting. Some of the conversations. Look, I think there's more than enough money given the right structure and for the right investor.
I guess where I'm going to, I think, is most people think that they can't themselves invest in a farm because it's so hard, and say, well, yeah, you can go off and do your own, and it is quite hard to set up with yourself. Or now there's things like ORICoop, which allows you to invest in these farms. So the question was, Rohan, who can invest into farms and who is investing in farms? And I guess what I'm getting at is does ORICoop provide a whole new world for people out there who happen to love organic farming to get stuck into it and investing in organic farming? So maybe just a bit of reflection on who can invest currently now and how hard it is, or what the processes are, and then where does ORICoop slot into that world?
Yeah, well, we'd certainly like to enable that. We'd certainly like to enable more than just large fund manager investing in farms. We'd like to be able to enable those folk that did support the ORICoop raising, that wanted to have exposure to farms for the absolute long term, because they could understand that the social benefit, and I'm very happy with the idea the return was would be indexed to inflation over time, would be a real return, and it's and reflects the risks of owning farms as opposed to owning other assets. So we very much like to enable the full spectrum of investors to be able to invest in farms. So I don't think we've necessarily solved it as yet, as in solved what the different structures might be. I think we've clearly got a resounding yes on a property trust type structure for larger investors. I think we're still working through what the structures might be that enable individuals to invest in smaller farms.
Mm-hmm.
We may find that we can go back to our the previous structure. May actually be the right structure for that type of investment. But
being CCUs.
Being CCUs.
Yep.
Yes, by virtue of the fact that the CCU investors, those retail investors, very much got the idea. Very much got the idea that they were aligned investors, and that they were getting much more than simply a return on capital. They were looking for a social type return.
Well, Rohan, this has been brilliant. I have really appreciated you just unpacking the journey that ORICoop's on with investment and just investment in general. I appreciate your support, your steady hand with this whole process. I think there's, again, so much potential to support good farming across Australia, and I want to see ORICoop right up there leading the charge. Appreciate your time, mate, and no doubt we'll see you around the organic farming industry over the next few years as we get stuck into this fully.
Absolutely. Well, I've loved being part of ORICoop, and I fully support what you guys are trying to do, and you've got an amazing board kind of and vision for the future. So all power to you.
Thank you, Rohan. And where can people go to find out more about you and your work around the Incubator Co-op and GetUp? Do they just type that in and they'll get there?
Yeah, getup.com will do it, or incubator.coop will also do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
Thanks again, mate, and we'll speak soon.
All right. Cheers. Take care.
Thanks for your attention. We hope you really enjoyed that interview. We are the Organic and Regenerative Investment Co-operative. We would love for you to sign up, become a member, follow us on all the social media accounts, connect with other like-minded people who want to see organic farming thrive across Australia. Please watch the other videos in our series as well, and share amongst your friends and family. But please do get in contact. We'd love to chat.